Hi, my name is Ryan Anderson, and I'm going to be talking about the youth in my community and basically the increasing amount of social media use and the increasing amount of electronic use. It seems like more and more today kids are surrounded by technology ranging from Amazon Alexa to their iPhones. And basically, what I want to do is work with the leaders of my community to implement alternatives to the youth so they can get more focused on building character and building respect rather than building their Instagram followers. All right, so let's get started. So the first thing I want to talk about is electronic use and its increasing number in the youth. So it seems like nowadays kids are more worried about playing Fortnite or going on Instagram rather than doing their schoolwork. And I think that needs to change. I've seen it firsthand. Just last weekend I was coaching a football team, and as soon as the game was over, one of the kids he was asking his mom for his tablet. So I was asking him about it, and he said he was more worried about his tablet than he was the football game. So I think that'll show you a perfect example of how bad it's gotten. I think the first problem is social media. It seems to run our lives nowadays. It seems like everywhere you go, the first thing you got to do is post it on your social media or worry about how many likes you have. And I think basically this develops a false sense of reality for kids. And I think we need to shift away from that. And I think the problem is it's shifting into school also. You can see it firsthand when kids would rather go on social media for 2 hours or then do their math homework, and your grades will decline as a result. So I think the first step in implementing the basically decreasing the use of electronics, decreasing the use of social media is providing these alternatives for the kids. And I think these alternatives, such as sports, volunteering, or music, will be perfect for them. And one thing I want to talk about overall with this problem of electronic use is it's a problem we've seen everywhere. It's a problem in society today, everywhere. But I think the first step in my community is implementing these alternatives to counteract this use. So the first thing I want to talk about is sports and why I think these are so important for kids to be involved in. So I was talking with a few coaches of mine, and they were explaining sports perfectly to me. They were explaining that sports help develop a sense of hard work, a sense of discipline, sense of lifelong friendships, sense of good self-esteem, and I couldn't agree more. For myself, me personally, like I have friends that I'm friends with still talking to now that I can still remember meeting them on my first football team. And the same thing with self-esteem. When you get that good hit or when you get that good tackle the game before and you come to school the next day, you're feeling great. So one thing with sports, I think academics and sports kind of go hand in hand. So especially once you get to high school and as you get older, you can't play sports unless you have good grades. And I've seen it with my friends first experience. I mean, when they couldn't play in the football games because they didn't have good grades, or they couldn't join the teams because they didn't have good grades. So academics, it definitely with sports, it develops a dedication towards a championship. When you're working and practicing every day towards a championship, towards a goal, develops a dedication, and that can be applied to school as well. When you're studying every day and you're working hard every day to get those good grades, this definitely sports helps you develop that dedication. My personal experience with sports is I've seen with some of my friends that I'm still talking to now. I've seen them play sports and everything's going good. They're worried about getting a job, worried about developing. They're just everything is going positively. And as soon as they're done playing sports, they're back doing bad things, back getting in trouble again, and doing negative things in their life. So I definitely think sports gives kids a good outlet to positives and a good way to develop these positive character skills. To implement sports in my community, I would require that kids either play one sport or one physical activity each semester. Volunteering. So I think volunteering has definitely a lot more positive effects than people realize on themselves than to others. Volunteering helps us develop a sense of community with one another. It develops a sense of giving back, and that joy of giving back. You always feel great the next day when you after you've gone to that food drive or helps or coach that football team because it feels good to give back and help others. And this sense of community helps develop social skills with your community and develop friendships. Now, I have this quote here, making a difference. Basically, it makes a difference on everyone's lives. including yours. And it develops a sense of equality. And that's the number one reason why I think we should implement this in the youth. When you're taking care of the less fortunate, taking care of them, you're not looking down on them, and you're looking at them as your equal. So I think it'll help people to not help the youth to not look down on the less fortunate instead, but rise them up and look at them as their friend. To implement this in my community for volunteering, I would require to have a certain amount of volunteer hours after each grade year in order to move on. Music and drama. So sports aren't for everyone. Not everyone is going to be the next Derek Jeter. Not everyone is going to be the next Tom Brady, and that's all right. Instead, they can be the next Leonardo DiCaprio or next Adele. But they don't have access to that because I feel like nowadays with the youth, instead, when they don't get picked for that sports team or they don't enjoy that sports game, they instead would rather quit and just play on their phone or go on Instagram or just go play Fortnite. But now I feel like we need to make music and drama more accessible. And I think in order to do that, I want to work with the teachers and I want to work with the adults in my community to help develop these clubs and encourage these kids to join these clubs and encourage them that just because they're not the best athlete that there isn't anything else for them. And I think joining this music or these drama clubs, it definitely increases a lot of skills people aren't aware of. It helps you develop an imagination when you're creating that song, creating that play, and it helps you develop creativeness. So I think we need to implement this by having it more accessible and working with the teachers to make the clubs and encourage the kids to join those clubs. Limiting the use of electronics. Now, there's definitely sometimes you're going to have to use your phone, and there are positive effects for the cell phones. But I think in order to limit the use, alternatives are one thing, but overall, we just need to set limits to how much we're using these cell phones or using this Xbox. In order to do that, perfect example, you have a timer setting on your iPhone, set it to each app. So I think we as parents and adults, we need to implement these settings. We need to have block controls after a certain amount of time, or make sure that the kids are doing their homework and going to the sports practices before they can go on Instagram, before they can play Xbox, and encourage them to go to these alternatives, as I stated before, and encourage them to take place in it instead of going on their phones. My final recommendation, I think, basically for me, I think parents are the first step. I think when you're outside, I think you need to encourage them to go to these events. When you're outside, when it's nice outside, tell them to go outside and play and encourage them in activities and lead them. But you have to lead by example. I think the number one problem is growing up, all the kids, all they see is their parents on their cell phones all the time, so they lead by example and do the same thing. So I think as parents, we need to start implementing limiting the use of electronics, and when they're playing that sport, join in with them, play with them in that game, and encourage them and keep teaching them why it's important that they keep partaking in these activities instead of on their electronic. The positive effects. Well, now I know there are people that say cell phones have their positive effects. They do. They definitely do have their positive effects. But the overuse, especially in the youth nowadays, it's gotten to be negative. So I think nowadays, basically as a community, we need to start implementing these values like respect and not your Instagram followers. One day these kids are going to be taking care of me, and I want them to value good character and respect, not their devices. Thank you very much. Here are my references.